So hi everyone, welcome to this session, the fourth, I guess, on how you can understand your findings in your research, especially the research you do in your classes. And I think, first of all, I would like to appreciate all of you for your efforts, because it's really interesting that teachers are engaged in research, which gives them new insights into their practices. And also, you know, you build confidence. You also learn more about your students through that process, which is offering you a great deal of professional development as a teacher. And the benefits you get from teacher research is usually beyond the ones that you can get from any other profession development strategy, because research is giving you a lot of room for thinking, reflection, change, and also deeper understanding in many ways. It makes you a very different teacher. And in some literature, it is argued that you develop a new identity as a teacher by being also researcher of your own practices in your classroom. This is great. I mean, I always ask people how they feel about it, and the responses I get are usually about how free they feel and how satisfied they feel about understanding their own practices, their own learners, and many other details about the context of the classroom, I would say. And as far as I found out that you have been doing research and now you're at the stage of collecting and analyzing the data, and most probably you're soon going to be in the process of creating sense or creating a kind of interpretation of your findings, making sense of the data, what they mean to me as a teacher. How am I going to interpret my findings, which is really about how critical you are about reflection. We need to reflect on our findings. And today I'm going to show you what you can do and how you can try to understand your findings, because findings are kind of concrete results, but they don't usually translate into practice, or they don't usually have any impact on you unless you reflect on them. So we need to first display all the findings and then understand them to be able to take action. And this action can be, does not have to be something that you change all the time, but something that impact your design of the course, or you know, create some activities, understand more about your beliefs about teaching and learning. So the impact of understanding your findings is actually the most important, one of the most important cycles in your research. So first of all, I mean, this is the major aim of our webinar, which we announced before in general, but more specifically, I'll start with this, like, why do we do action research or classroom action research? And then how it helps us as a teacher. And in the first place, I mean, you need to think about why I do research in my classroom. And I would actually ask you to write in the chat, why do you do that research in your classrooms? I mean, okay, somebody is helping you, it's a program, it's a project. But apart from that, what is your personal motive to do that research? If you can briefly write in your chat, I can then maybe return to that. It doesn't have to be a long one. Just tell me briefly and clearly why you do action research. But in generally, action research has a purpose. It's a professional development process, and it's a kind of a tool. It's a strategy as well for us as teachers and practitioners. Our aim is to improve our practices. I mean, not because they are deficient, but because they can be improvable, because there is always room for improvement of our practices. we can't say that I'm teaching perfectly and I can stop thinking about my teaching. I don't need to improve it, but there is always room for improvement, as we said. So action research does not imply that you're teaching badly or you're teaching improperly, but it is actually helping you develop it in according to your learners, according to the new insights that is coming up in the classroom. This is the important process. So any developmental activity, including action research, is because there is room for development. And you, as teachers, as lifelong learners, can take this as an opportunity to understand your practices and improve your practices by using kind of evidence from your students, some kind of data that you can make sense of when you're a researcher. And in action research, we usually do systematic data collection and analysis, which is what you are doing. And then after the analysis itself is a start for you to think about. So to get deeper understanding, you need to reflect on your analysis. It means on your findings, which I'm going to show you some simple models maybe or frameworks to understand. So ultimate aim is to gain critical insights into our findings. To do that, you need to know, what have I found in my research? You need to clearly reflect on this aspect, right? And I mean, it's also about taking control of the findings. And as I said, maybe if you analyze the data, you found something, but sometimes some of the findings go unnoticed by the teacher because there isn't enough reflection on the findings. So if you want to take control of our findings, we need to evaluate and challenge our assumptions. How did I start this research? What was the problem in my research? What was discomforting when I started to collect data or to ask research questions? So maybe it's good to create a kind of toolbox or some kind of notes about, okay, what was my assumption about that? Let's say if your topic is giving feedback and students, for example, reported that they didn't understand your feedback, or the feedback is hard to follow, etc., and then you try to develop your feedback practices. So, I mean, maybe you can start with saying, okay, what is feedback for me? And how is it best to be communicated with students? And you start challenging your assumptions and your beliefs, maybe that are unconscious, with the report, like complaint, or with the feedback, critical feedback by your students. You started to understand that your feedback practices need to be modified, improved, or even changed. So you start this research. So you need to go back after the data collection and after the analysis, and then when you are listing your findings according to the research questions, then you need to go through your assumptions again and the beliefs that are probably unconscious. And now you need to, because the data will tell you what you need to do, but also it will tell you how you need to change your belief system, how you need to challenge your existing assumptions about giving feedback, right? So you need to go through these two processes together. Because action research is not only for changing practices. Unless you challenge your assumptions or beliefs in a new way, in a new format, then the change in the practices will not mean much, because you're not going to keep them going in the future. You're not going to practice them in the next year. You're going to go back to your assumptions, hold your beliefs, old beliefs. So action research, or the data analysis and meaning-making process of this data, should lead some assumption challenging your assumptions, let's say, and also revisiting your beliefs. Otherwise, you can't say that, okay, they want this and I did that. But how did you change your mindset? How did you revisit your beliefs? How did you challenge your existing assumptions about that practice? So the change in the cognition is also very important. And this is achieved if you reflect on your findings, right? This is important. That's why I'm actually focusing on that, because interpreting is fine. I mean, you can learn that, but by interpreting, we also want to achieve a kind of mental change, cognitive change in us as a teacher. So possibly, if you can, challenge your assumptions and revisit your beliefs, you might come up with, new ones, or you can replace them with different perspectives of looking into feedback practices, if that is your topic. And then maybe you can reconsider your practices, which are often under-examined because you don't have data. What I mean by saying under-examined, you normally draw on your existing assumptions when you are analyzing or assessing your practices. So you don't have data or student perspectives to be able to examine your practices. And the data from students give you a lot of opportunity to reconsider all these. And usually some of the practices are repeated and repeated because although you don't ask for feedback from students, or you don't know how students are learning or not learning through these practices, and these practices and the beliefs got frozen in time. Like, you never think about changing or understanding or going deeper into the understanding of learners. So action research will help you create improved, enhanced, and even new ways of being and doing as a teacher. That is the important point. But for that purpose, as I said, you need to take control of the findings. You need to reflect on the findings. You need to really make sense of the findings before you complete your research. The most important part of the research after the data collection is how you're going to understand, interpret the finding. That is the key point. So interpretation sometimes is important, but I think there are things that we need to know. Many teachers usually do quantitative research. They give a questionnaire, they collect data, and then their numerical data, and they try to say that, okay, I did something new in my classes, and then it increased my students' learning, and the students learned new things. Here are the things they learned. But actually, knowing that may not give you kind of opportunity to improve your practice. This is because the numbers will only tell you that your practice improved learning, but it will not tell you how. So raising students' voices in the data is really key for interpretation. Otherwise, your interpretation process is going to be very superficial, because the intervention-based results will tell you that you have done a great job and they learned new things on the reports of the students. But if you collect, let's say, interview data, if you collect observational data, if you have focus group discussions with your students, if you listen to them when they are talking about your practices, is going to give you a lot of room, a lot of opportunity, a lot of insights into the practice itself. So in action research, we not only need this numerical data, but also this verbal data, where students are actively talking about their practices of learning and about your teaching, right? That's the key point. And then, imagine that the intervention influences students' learning process, but as I said, it will not give you much about how that process went on. And action research, the third thing before we start interpretation, it does not give a right or wrong answer, or nor fixed results, because results might change when you give the question at the next day or to the next classroom who participated in your intervention. So, but actually, if you want action research to give us, new ways of thinking and teaching and learning, then we need to actually listen to the students. We need to collect different data. If you don't have qualitative data, like verbal data, where students are expressing their opinions, where students are offering some kind of written data, then I think the interpretation will be limited, and it will not make you reflective enough to make sense of the data, right? If you haven't collected any qualitative data so far, I would suggest go back and talk to students, record them and transcribe them, and try to work on this verbal transcription of the text, right? So interpretation then, I mean, if you have enough data, if you have done the analysis, which is about numerical and verbal data, then you can ask actually two questions. So what? Okay, I found this, so what? So you need to say, okay, what am I going to do with these findings? And what does it mean for me as the researcher, as the teacher? And then secondly, you need to ask why question to the question, okay, you found something. And then you can say, why did I find that result? I mean, if it is like a very critical feedback by students, or low motivation, or some other things which could be negative. So why have I found these results? I think you need to think about these two questions in order to inform your current and future teaching practices. But if you say, so what question? So what question is actually about the meaning of what is found. And then why question is about how you are making sense of the data. So there is a lot you can do at this point even. So if you found something, think about what you are doing as a teacher, even if the results are positive or negative or critical, or kind of discomfort expressed by the students, doesn't matter. So why? So why, while addressing why question, maybe you can come up with some contextual information. You can think about your materials. You can think about how you are interacting with the students to be able to make sense of the data or the analysis you found. So ask so what questions and ask why questions. These are really important questions that we need to address. But usually what I would also suggest, sometimes addressing the issue of intervention shouldn't be done in solitude. You need to find a peer, you need to find a partner, you need to work with your mentor, for example. You need to present your findings and try to ask questions to the data and then listen to others. So I would suggest interpret your findings with someone who knows your classroom, who knows your context, who knows your research, and then try to make it dialogical and conversational. Don't try to do it yourself alone, because interpretation requires kind of brainstorming with someone rather than alone. So you need to have, you can find a partner from this group actually, or your group leader, project leader can help you pair up with someone, and then you know, have Zoom meetings and you present what you found, and then tell about your understandings of the data. And then maybe they will ask you, okay, explain to me why was that so, how you can use that, what does it mean? So you have the chance to actually critically reflect on the findings if you talk to someone. But if you do it alone, I'm afraid it will be very, let's say, superficial in a way. I like when teachers discuss what they find, how they did it, what it means for them, and then talk about it, because talking process, the verbal reflection process, will help you brainstorm and will help you develop some new insights and understandings, because you're expressing what you think about your teaching and learning. So doing it with someone or in a group would really help in many ways, I must say. So I mean, as we said, first we need to demonstrate our findings, and then try to understand what it might mean and how you can approach for interpretation. I mean, I'm actually putting this triangulation, a paramedical shape, where you can find actually 4 things within this. The major problem or major issue is triangulation of evidence. So we need to, I mean, if we have some evidence, where is this evidence coming from? Like, Is it just interview? Is it observation? Is it second interview? Or is it written data? So triangulation will help you understand the evidence better. And then, as I said, you need to discuss the evidence with other people, or it could also be your students. I didn't tell that, but you can also talk about the findings with your students. That is usually a road not taken very often. I would suggest design a focus group interview or focus group discussion in your class. Show them the findings. Like, this was the question I was trying to answer in my class, in the data, in the research, and here is what I found. What do you think about this finding? And then they should reflect on that. And even that data could be used to understand. And in your reflection, you can refer to what students are saying when you are writing your reflective part of the action research. And also, I mean, with this in mind, maybe you can also relate evidence to each other, so you can create some connected points. I mean, here is the finding that this could be related to this could be related to that. So what are the contextual constraints or contextual facilities that led to these results, for example? So it's also understanding the results in relation to the context. This is another important issue that I think we need to think about when we are doing research. So in that sense, maybe to understand, to discuss, to relate all this data, we can talk about counting and looking for patterns, like how many students said this, how many times they highlighted this, or which students mentioned this particular issue. Who are these students in the classroom? Are they, for example, very committed ones, or are they disengaged ones? So maybe you can even look into the data from that perspective. Which students are reporting what, and who are they in this classroom, okay? And as I said, discussing your interpretation with learners, with teachers, with students, with other people, or external people, as I said, these mentors could also help you. And also, I would suggest before you start interpreting, you can also put the data into charts, diagrams, and other visuals where you can clearly see the tendency of the findings. Even if they are qualitative findings, you can actually create some clouds, word clouds, or some other visual representation of the words. So that could really help you understand the general tendency before you start interpreting it. So what I'm saying here exactly is that you need to sort out the data more clearly, visualize it, discuss it, list it, make bullet points before you start understanding or interpreting the data, because interpretation is only possible if you really know what you have as a data finding, as a finding, right? If it is messy, if there are unclear points in your mind about your findings, that is not going to lead to a very a strong interpretation process. For interpretation to start, we need a clear description of the findings. But however you want, you can do that. It's written, verbal, visualized, tabulated, whatever. And to strengthen your interpretation, I think you need to find a mentor, you need to find someone, you need to find a colleague, or you need to do it with your students, or even all of them. If you have time, do it with your students, do it with your mentor, do it with your colleagues, if you can find colleagues, and share it here. For example, in one of the sessions, you can invite people to a Zoom meeting. You can say, look, I want to discuss my findings. Is there anyone who would like to come and join me when it is possible, like when we can meet? Create your own opportunity, or invite people who could be interested in listening to you in that sense. And this discussion process will give you a lot of, or ample evidence, with ample ideas that you can note and then think more about it, right? So this is one of the actually ways of looking at your findings, some reflections, so how you can do that. I talk about reflection as a cycle, as a cyclical process, and we can reflect on the findings in this order. For example, you first start to react by selecting particular points, right? What did I find? Which of them are important? Which findings need to be critically reflected upon? Okay, I found 5 things. Which of them are critical? So you can rank them. And you can say, this one is really important for me to know because there was a problem in the way, for example, I gave feedback, and this is telling me a lot about how I can reshape my feedback practices and what I need to do and why I need to make the change. So maybe you can start by sorting out the findings and then selecting important bits. I don't mean that you should put aside some of the findings, but I want you to reflect on it by ranking them, seeing the most important ones to the least important ones, and then try to make sense of all of them. Actually, it's not about putting them aside. And then you can categorize these findings in different ways. When you are categorizing, you can look at which of them are trivial, which of them needs closer look, which of them needs to be further supported. Maybe you found something, but you're not convinced enough on the finding. And then you can say, okay, I think I need more data about that. Let me design another interview with students to be able to better understand this finding. If you can't make sense of the finding, then you can go back and then ask again. This is because research, especially action research, is a iterative process. You don't need to think that, okay, I have collected data and I lost the chance. No, this is the finding. Go back with the data, talk to them, take notes, and try to make sense of it. And then which data is important, which data surprised me, for example, and why it surprised me, because as I said, the assumptions are important. So if you have a particular assumption, a belief, and which is contradicted by the data, then it might surprise you. Oh, I never thought about that. Why did they, report that way? So then it puzzles you. This is also important. And then there could be some actually findings that could inspire and motivate you for doing better things. I think you should think about these issues a lot, but this is just a suggestion. So categorization might be done in a different way according to your needs. So you can create another set of categories. So I'm just saying that importance, need for further data, sense of surprise, or sense of inspiration and motivation. So you can put other things in your list. And then you start reviewing and classifying your findings. Actually, you can say, okay, which of these findings encourage me to change and modify my practices? Because you need to make a very critical decision. You should not, all of a sudden decide to change things if you're not convinced. So you need to maybe make another round of data collection or another round of intervention in a new cycle to be able to feel that, okay, I want to change, I need to change that. So not all findings leads change in your practices. And then which of them influenced your beliefs, as I said, which of them challenged your assumptions by contradicting, for example, and which of them is adding to your knowledge as a teacher? How is your teacher knowledge base changing? These are really simple but strong messages that I'm giving to you. So if you found something, you need to ask these questions. Okay, this finding is promising. It's encouraging me to make the changes, but you can also say this finding is good, but I'm not convinced. Go back, talk more, collect more data, discuss with them, discuss with your colleagues, and try to think if you can or need to do these changes in your practices. And then maybe you can talk about these findings by adapting them. Like, am I going to adopt them urgently, immediately, short term? These are short term things that I can do, or they are long term. So some changes can be easily adopted and integrated into your teaching, but some require further preparations. Some require further resources, for example. So you need to make a plan to make the change. It doesn't happen easily. So maybe you can say, okay, some findings, there are important findings that I can integrate into my teaching immediately, or they can only be achieved in the long term. And then you make some plans. So which of them? And what is important in making this decision is you should communicate your findings and your interpretations with your students. Okay, go back to the classroom when you have a list of what to do, what not, and then tell your students, in my research in this classroom I conducted with you, I found this and that, and here is how I interpreted this. And then communicate with them how you're gonna address these things. What I mean, okay, you want this, I'm gonna change the practice in this particular way. Are you okay with that? Or you can say, I cannot do it now, but I will plan a further intervention, a further plan to integrate this finding into my teaching. So students, once they see that, the feedback in the form of research process they gave, they are recognized and appreciated, and what they said is kind of considered for change in the classroom. So this is an important process, which usually, which teachers don't usually do. Like, they don't communicate the findings with the students, but the only thing that I consider when I do action research is to improve teaching and learning. So you need to go back and reflect with your students. You need to make joint decisions about what to change now and how you can change in the long run. And even taking this as an opportunity, you can give a lot of good messages to your students. You can say, look, you have said this and that. I have analyzed it. I have discussed this with the experts, mentors, and others. This is how I'm going to change. But there are messages for you as well as students. So this is a good time to remind them that they also need to understand the data. The data will tell them a lot, right? So maybe you can create a bullet point. Here is what I think you should also consider when you are learning, and then give them kind of some suggestions or recommendations, or even like kind of advice on what to do. So you can say that research in the classroom is not just for me to listen, it's also for you to know about, to consider. So here are the things you can do. Or you can even say, how would you interpret these findings? What is it in that for you? Let me know. So you see what I mean? So research in the classroom is not just for us, but for students. But as long as you communicate your findings with them clearly in a session, you might say that we don't have time, but this session is maybe more important than what you can teach in an hour. So you can say, next week, this hour in our class, we are going to have another type of lesson we're going to discuss. And if you do that in English, or in the language that you're teaching, if you're teaching another language, then it's going to be a practice opportunity. They will talk about their feelings, they will talk about their perspectives and ideas. So this is really a great opportunity to keep them thinking and talking. So what I'm saying, interpretation process should involve students, where they can make sense of the data for themselves and help you reflect on the findings to get some kind of insights into how you can make the changes. So if you want to do that, that's going to be great. Please try. It's not going to take a lot of time, but it's going to be very useful and constructive for students. So maybe they will decide to do things differently because they saw the data, they saw the evidence, because evidence convinces everyone. If you show them that there is evidence against or for something, people usually, feel more convinced to make changes in their learning and teaching, I would say. So in the fifth level, I said acting. So you need to plan the change. After all these conversations, discussions, dialogues with multiple people, including specifically the students, you can now plan the change or plan the modification or plan how to integrate whatever. I don't want you to think that the change is the only result, but modification, sometimes the changes are trivial or invisible, but they are big. So you can plan how are you gonna make some changes in your plans, lesson plans and syllabus? Are you gonna, like change or modify or kind of redefine your activities and tasks? Are you gonna reconsider the interaction pattern in the classroom or how you are instructing in the classroom? So these are just examples, but you can think about, like, even, for example, you can think about technology, how much technology you can use to be able to make those changes, and then discuss this with students as well. Given the constraints, infrastructure constraints in your countries, maybe you can think about, simple technological tools to be able to do all these changes. So what I'm saying here is that you need to carefully, like, you don't need to take all the findings granted and then just do whatever they say, but you need to negotiate, try to understand, develop, very practical processes that can make learning better and more efficient for them. And they need to also take some lessons from the data. They need to see the results and then say, okay, according to the findings, I think it seems I should do this and that. It's not only you who will change, but it's also the students who will understand and create a change process in their study habits, in their understandings of learning. This is one of the great ideas about that, right? So what I can say, there is no particular recipe for how to interpret the data. You need to just think about pedagogical connections, develop insightful, personal, but evidence-based explanations, engage in ongoing reflection, even like co-reflection with different people, and then, some inferences from what they said. Okay, this might infer this might imply that. How can I, gain deeper understanding into whatever I have found? So think about that. So everyone can interpret findings differently with different people in different ways, and you need to create that interpretation process yourself. How are you going to take control of the interpretation process? And from this book, actually, this is a book about pre-service teacher research process, and they actually suggest different cyclical process where they are talking about immediate evaluation as the core point of the interpretation process. And then they also highlight what I said, feedback from others. What they say, feedback from others, is interpreted by me as, how can I co-reflect on my findings with other people? Because I might be too subjective and biased when I'm interpreting my results. But if I work with them, other people can maybe ask me the questions that I have never thought about, and they can show me new insights that could awaken me from what I maybe see in the data or what I can't see in the data. So others' opinions as external perspectives would be really great for you to understand. So this slide is more about, this is your focus. So identify your focus and then evaluate the evaluate the findings according to your focus. This was the thing that I wanted to find, and here is what I found. So what is your focus? How you're addressing that focus, okay? And as I said, it says include your analysis of students' learning and feedback from others. As I said, this is not enough. The critical friend is good, a peer from your research group, a mentor that you are that is helping you, and also the students. I think most literature ignores the student's role in action research, especially after the data collection, because they collect the data from students and then they analyze it, they interpret it, but students are disconnected from the further processes. This is the missing link in it. So if you can achieve that, that's going to be really useful for you, a new actually step in your career, how to listen to the students in a purposeful manner. It's not about getting judgmental, evaluative responses from them. It's about a constructive understanding process that's going to encourage them to tell more, maybe. Okay, and when you are interpreting, as I said, refer to multiple sources of evidence, like here is the written data, here is the verbal data, here is the observation data. So you try to include different sources. We call it like maybe multi-source evidence, right? And then, as I said before, I think this, with the benefit of the hindsight, like looking into the core issue from external perspectives through a lens that helps you see the factors, because you know the factors. I mean, if you found a particular result or a finding in your research that could be related to what is going on in your context, what is going on in your classroom, what is going on in the society, what is going on in the classroom. So make this link to be able to understand what is going on, okay? That's also very important. And it also says you can, as I said, you can discuss with experts and mentors. When you're doing that, maybe they will give you some ideas about reading further literature to be able to make sense more. That's also be very important as well. So when you are actually interpreting, there will be some do's and don'ts. This is from the same reference. I think it's important to create an immediate evaluation process and then allocating time, as I said, and yeah, you know, like be prepared for things that you're not ready to hear, because normally research is not always supporting your assumptions or supporting your beliefs, but they are also contradicting them, which we need to be really prepared, and we should be open and transparent. Okay, students are complaining about several aspects of my teaching, but I can overcome them, I can change them, I can make it better. So the idea is not feeling resented, but feeling happy and relieved that you're getting this feedback and you're, you know, changing or improving your practices. And as I said, a critical friend, a student, a mentor, an expert will really help you. So it also suggests don't rush an evaluation, don't jump to the conclusions, and don't discount things that you don't want to hear. Go for them. Yeah, if some findings are contradicting your expectations and making you feel kind of offended, I think it's time to change. So you need to get the message and stop feeling offended, but go for it and revise it, improve it. It's not a problem. You know, if you ignore them, it is a problem. But if you take them as an opportunity to learn with and from, then this is good. This is the developmental aspect. So we usually support these developing and learning teachers. And teachers can only learn from their mistakes, can only learn from the criticism from their learners and others, and they need to take these into consideration and work on them. And research actually give them a lot of time to do that. And as this literature, the same literature is saying, they say create time for meta-evaluation. So if you're coming to conclusions, support them with kind of evidence, like, okay, here is the finding that led me to thinking in this way, or here is the finding that led me to make these changes, because the importance of this finding is clearly seen in reference to many students who are telling you similar, identical feedback. Avoid being too self-congratulatory, which means don't exaggerate the findings and take it personal. Like, okay, there is good feedback, but it doesn't mean that you should always feel that this is something good. You need to maybe be self-critical. And then, because the data, whether good or bad, whether constructive or judgmental, they need to keep you transparent, honest, and you need to keep being self-critical in many ways. So another message is be reflective on your weaknesses and the points that you're challenged with, contradicted areas of teaching, rather than leave them unspoken and unattended. Don't ignore the judgmental feedback, or even critical feedback that is really giving you something, kind of a practical message to be able to change things. So change them and then see how it goes, and then try to find a happy medium between what students want and how you want to do it. So it's an experimentation process. You should leave room for experimenting with new practices. So you also need to, I think, most of the time we try to do a lot for our students, but I think we need to expose our limitations and also embrace our limitations as teachers. If there is something that we can't do, even though the data tells us that we need to make a change, but it's not possible, I think you can communicate this with your students, or even if it is a personal limitation that you can't do it, don't stress yourself, but communicate with students. Okay, you want this, but this is beyond my ability. This is beyond the resources. I can't do it, or let's discuss how we can. You see what I mean? So students should always be kept within the research, and if you have some weaknesses, you should communicate. You should ask for help. Even though the data is so convincing that you need to do that change. So in general, I think you should ask yourself these questions in general if you want a guide to, just reflect on the findings as we've been discussing. What do the findings tell me that I didn't know before? So you need to go for that. Okay, I didn't know that the students like this and that, or they had a tendency to do these things. So you need to show that what I didn't know without this analysis, without this finding. Okay. And also the other big thing is what is my research question? What question have I asked, and how have I answered the research questions with these findings? This is really important. And once you make this link, the findings and research questions, so how can I answer the question? Then you can say, how can I link the findings to my teaching? And that is the interpretation question. So to make the interpretation a link, you need to understand these are my findings, and here is how I can relate them to my teaching. And what can I learn from the results? So what are the things that I didn't know, and what are the things that I have just learned as a teacher with the data? And then how can I infer them? So you can ask yourself more questions, but you need to ask critical questions like, have I answered the questions? What did I learn? What were the things that I didn't know without this data? And how can I make the link to my teaching? These are really great points that I think you should understand when you are doing critical analysis of your analysis, critical analysis of your findings, right? Yeah, I think there are also, I asked a question before I finish my presentation. I think Dishbai says they do the research to improve practice. Very good. So, but actually you need to maybe put another point here, Dishbai, like not only the practices, but also myself, improve my understandings, challenge my assumptions, even revisit my existing beliefs about teaching as a teacher. So practices and understandings should go hand in hand if you want to make a further long-term change as a teacher in your profession. And then Marwa talks about observation, because there is a need to find solution to a problem. Okay, it's good. You can specify. And then it just talks about learners' needs and improved teaching. Also, myself, you should also think that, how am I going to improve myself as a teacher, my understandings, my beliefs, as I said. Yeah, thank you for your responses in the chat about that. I think you need to also think about, okay, why do I do that? Is it just to address learner needs? Is it just improve teaching? Or is it just maybe it will also directly or indirectly help you revisit your beliefs and even challenge your assumptions about teaching? So assumptions are usually superficial ideas that needs to be developed and changed. So you should also aim for personal development, personal cognitive changes in your mind about the issues that you are investigating in your classes. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to be with you and some of you coming and going. And is interesting presentation for me. I did that some years ago, and now I thought about what I will tell you. I think I have improved my presentation with this opportunity. Hi, Harry. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much, Kenan. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was lurking in the background when Amira started. Thank you very much. And you ended on a really high note, and I think that's important for our colleagues, how much you have improved your thinking on this over the years since you last did this presentation, I think 2 years ago. And that is something, looking at the comments that colleagues made in the chat box for why they're doing research, it's often more about the students. But Africa ELTA organized this mentoring project as a way of empowering teachers. We are hoping that teachers who engage in this would become what's been called would develop into thought leadership and have real informed ideas about why they are doing what they're doing. So I'm really grateful.
Exactly.
You talked about the what, but also the why, because that's very important. We often forget about the what and the why and focus more on the what. Just seeing a change without getting to understand how what has helped enable that change doesn't quite help us consolidate what we learned from action research. So thank you very much. I don't know if there are any other questions. If you just want to turn on your microphone and ask your question, maybe one or two, if you don't mind.
Okay. I have time, and we can do Q&A session.
Thank you.
That's very good.
Right.
And as you said, as I said again, I want to repeat that the learners should still be part of the process after the data collection. We shouldn't disconnect them from the process of research as a teacher. That is a missing link. There is a gap in our understanding usually. And I like if teachers do classroom research, they need to, handle the process with students till the end, to the understanding, to the practical changes even. You should negotiate the findings and the plans for the change. As an interesting arena where I can give that message actually.
Great. So is there any other question, please, if you would like to ask a question? Just switch on your microphone and ask your question.
They can always send me an email and I will try to respond to their emails. And I can write my email here if they have practical questions about, because maybe they will remember a question later. So we can always address their issues. I like helping teachers because I really respect teachers doing research. It's not easy. They spend a lot of time, and I try to support teachers when they do research, especially.
Thank you very much. Maybe I should have mentioned that Professor Kenan Dikilitas was coordinator of the ITFL Research Special Interest Group for quite a long time.
With Anna. Maybe they have received some sessions from Anna as well, right?
Anna helped edit with Amira and myself the last collection. Right. And the other thing I thought I should say is that this research mentoring project was actually a result of my conversation with you, Kenan.
I remember that
when we set up the conference, the pre-conference event in Nigeria. So you've been at the beginning of this, and it's great to have you back to see that we are in our second phase.
Involve me at any stage, Harry. I will be happy to provide support as much as I can, and I also appreciate your effort to keep this going. This is a great project for Africa.
Thank you. So, well, in the absence of a question, and we really appreciate you taking your time to support the work that we're doing with our colleagues. Thanks for sharing your contact. I'm sure that some of them would get back to you.
Yeah, exactly. They can.
We will be getting in touch just to share with you what we've been doing and what the outcome of all of this is. Thank you so much. And maybe
you're welcome.
Goodbye now.
Great to see everyone. Some people are writing, but they are also okay. I thank you, Amira, as well to you for introducing me, and also thank you, Nicole. It's good people like the idea of learners' involvement. This is really nice, and I'm also very happy to see you, Harry, for after a long time that we haven't met. We had really some email exchanges, but we haven't been able to talk.
And thanks for guiding us through our chapter in your book. Amira and I published a chapter on mentoring in Africa in a book that Kenan edited.
With Mark,
I'm very proud of it. It's hanging on my shelf, and I show it off all the time.
It's going to be a great coincidence that I got the printed versions today, just before this session. I mean.
I had my copy of the book a long time ago. Well,
I just got it today, actually. Somehow, I think they got lost in the postal service. It's good.
That's interesting that the editor gets their book.
Exactly. That's novel, So thank you very much, and hope to see you again, Harry, and others, Samira as well. Thank you. See you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.